The fluorescent lights of the trauma bay flickered as 6 men, armed with suppressed submachine guns, stormed the emergency room. They expected terrified doctors, cowering patients, and an easy execution. What they didn't know was that the quiet new triage nurse was a former naval special warfare operator. Street Jude Medical Center sat on the gritty outskirts of El Paso, Texas, less than 3 miles from the relentless heat of the border. At 3 a.m. on a Tuesday, the emergency room was a purgatory of fluorescent lighting, the smell of cheap coffee, and the sharp, metallic tang of blood. For most nurses, the graveyard shift was an exercise in exhaustion. For 32-year-old Samantha Hayes, it was a sanctuary. Sam was new. She had been at St. Jude for exactly 3 weeks. To the rest of the staff, she was a quiet, hyper-competent enigma who kept her blonde hair tied in a severe bun and wore oversized scrubs that hid the lattice of shrapnel scars across her left shoulder. She never talked about her past, parried personal questions with polite deflections, and never flinched when the doors blew open. Her supervising physician, Dr. Benjamin Carter, a sleep-deprived resident with a penchant for stress-eating graham crackers, thought she was just an adrenaline junkie from a bigger city. Nurse Megan O'Brien, a 24-year-old local who gossiped like it was an Olympic sport, thought Sam was hiding a bad breakup. Neither of them knew that 14 months ago, Chief Petty Officer Samantha Hayes had been fast roping out of an MH-60 Blackhawk over the Syrian desert. As one of the few women to successfully navigate the grueling pipeline to become a SEAL, she had spent 8 years in the shadowy world of Tier 1 special operations. But a catastrophic raid in the Al-Hasaka province had left 3 of her teammates dead, and Sam, with a shattered clavicle and a profound desire to save lives instead of ending them. Nursing was her penance. Street Jude was her hiding place. But war has a funny way of finding the people who try to leave it behind. Incoming, the dispatch radio crackled, shattering the hum of the ER. We got a John Doe, mid-30s, multiple GSWs to the chest and abdomen. BP is tanking, 70/40. ETA is 2 minutes. He's circling the drain, folks. Dr. Carter dropped his graham cracker. All right, let's go. Trauma Bay 1. Megan, get the massive transfusion protocol ready. Sam, I need you on airway. Copy that, Sam said. Her voice was flat, devoid of the panic that laced Carter's. Her heart rate, normally hovering around a dead calm 50 beats per minute, barely ticked upward. She moved with a fluid, terrifying efficiency, prepping the laryngoscope and the endotracheal tubes before Carter had even snapped on his gloves. The automatic doors slid open with a hiss, and paramedics burst through, pushing a blood-soaked gurney. The patient was a Hispanic male, his chest a mess of crimson. He was gasping, his skin the color of wet ash. "Move on 3!" the lead paramedic shouted. 1, 2, 3! They hoisted the man onto the trauma bed. As Megan frantically cut away the man's ruined shirt, Sam leaned in to secure the airway. That was when she saw them. The entry wounds, they weren't the messy, sprawling craters of a cheap street weapon. They were tight, precise, grouped in a lethal triangle over center mass. 5.56 millimeter, Sam muttered under her breath, her eyes narrowing, tumbling rounds. Close range. "What was that, Sam?" Carter yelled over the chaotic beeping of the heart monitor. "Nothing, doctor. Airway is secured, tube is in." But her mind was already racing. A local gangbanger didn't shoot someone with NATO-grade rifle ammunition in a perfectly executed failure drill, 2 to the chest, one meant for the head that had clearly missed and grazed the patient's jaw. This wasn't a drug deal gone bad. This was a professional hit. She looked at the patient's hands, calloused, a distinctive, faded tattoo of a black scorpion on the webbing of his right thumb. Sam recognized it from a classified brief she'd read years ago during a joint task force operation with the DEA. The Los Escorpiones, a brutal, highly trained enforcement wing of the Sinaloa Cartel, mostly comprised of ex-military deserters. This man wasn't a victim. He was a high-value asset, likely a defector or a rival boss. And if a cartel hit squad had failed to kill him on the street, they wouldn't just let him recover in a county hospital. Sam looked up, scanning the ER. The police escort that normally accompanied shooting victims was absent. "Where's the PD?" Sam asked the lead paramedic, who was wiping blood from his forearms. "Don't know," the paramedic panted. Dispatch said 2 cruisers were en route, but they got diverted to a massive pileup on I-10. It's a madhouse out there tonight. A diversion. The hair on the back of Sam's neck stood up. The sterile smell of the hospital faded, replaced by the phantom scent of cordite and dust. Her OODA loop, observe, orient, decide, act, snapped into overdrive. Dr. Carter, Sam said, her voice cutting through the noise with unnatural authority. We need to lock down this ward. Right now. Carter looked up, holding a pair of forceps, his brow slick with sweat. What? Sam, I have a man bleeding out on my table. I don't have time for hospital bureaucracy. Doctor, she interrupted, stepping closer so only he could hear. Look at the wound grouping. Look at the tattoo. Whoever did this is coming to finish the job. We have no police presence. You need to hit the panic button and lock the exterior doors. Carter stared at her, bewildered by the sudden icy command in his triage nurse's eyes. Before he could respond, the lights in the trauma bay flickered and died. A heavy, suffocating silence fell over the room, broken only by the whir of the backup generators kicking in, casting the ER in a sickly, dim amber glow. What the hell? Megan squeaked, dropping a roll of gauze. Sam didn't wait for Carter's permission. She spun on her heel, bolting out of the trauma bay toward the main triage desk. But as she rounded the corner, she saw the silhouettes outside the frosted glass of the ambulance bay doors. 2 matte black SUVs had silently rolled up to the entrance. The doors opened, and 6 men stepped out. They weren't wearing bandanas or street clothes. They wore tactical plate carriers, night vision goggles pushed up on their helmets, and carried suppressed, short-barreled carbines. They moved with the terrifying, silent synchronization of an apex predator. The Cartel hit squad had arrived. Sam threw herself flat against the linoleum floor behind the triage counter, just as the glass of the main doors shattered inward. Puffed, puffed. The distinctive, muted spit of suppressed gunfire echoed through the reception area. The hospital security guard, an overweight 50-year-old named Frank, didn't even have time to unholster his revolver. He collapsed with a groan, clutching a bleeding wound in his thigh. They were taking the facility alive for now. Sam pressed her back against the cheap wooden cabinets beneath the desk. She closed her eyes, forcing her breathing into the tactical rhythm she had learned in Coronado. Inhale for 4 seconds. Hold for 4. Exhale for 4. Hold for 4. Her heart rate plummeted back to a steady, icy 60 beats per minute. The terrified nurse was gone. The operator was awake. Secure the perimeter. Cut the hard lines. Jam the cell signals, a rough voice commanded in rapid, clipped Spanish. Sam opened her eyes, peering through a small crack between the counter panels. The leader of the squad stepped into the amber light. He was a tall, heavily muscled man with a scar bisecting his left eyebrow. Héctor El Cuchillo Morales. He was a ghost in the DEA database, a former Mexican Special Forces commando who had defected to the cartel for a 7-figure payday. Sam recognized his methodology instantly. He was establishing a 360-degree security cordon. Where is he? Hector barked, grabbing a terrified triage receptionist by the collar of her scrubs. The man who just came in. Where is he? I don't know, the receptionist sobbed. Hector threw her to the ground and gestured to 2 of his men. Sweep the rooms, find him. Put a bullet in his brain. Anyone who gets in your way, kill them. Sam knew she had roughly 2 minutes before they reached Trauma Bay 1. If she did nothing, Carter, Megan, and the patient would be executed. If she tried to fight 6 heavily armed men head-on with her bare hands, she would be dead in 3 seconds. She needed a weapon. She needed the shadows. Sam slipped her shoes off, leaving them under the desk. In her socks, she moved with utter silence, leopard crawling down the side corridor toward the medical supply closet. She slipped inside, pulling the heavy wooden door shut until it clicked softly. Inside, the emergency lights cast long shadows over shelves of saline bags, bandages, and surgical kits. She didn't have a sidearm. She didn't have a combat knife. But a hospital was a warehouse of lethal instruments, if you knew how to use them. She grabbed a heavy steel oxygen cylinder, weighing about 10 pounds, and gripped it by the valve. Next, she ripped open a sterile surgical tray, pulling out a titanium Hashon Zero scalpel. It was tiny, only a few inches long, but the blade was sharper than any combat knife she had ever carried. Finally, she grabbed a roll of medical-grade adhesive tape. Outside the door, heavy combat boots crunched against the broken glass on the floor. They were splitting up. Rule number 1 of urban clearance: never clear alone. But these men were arrogant. They thought they were dealing with civilians. "Check the side rooms," a voice muttered in Spanish, just outside her door. Sam pressed herself into the corner behind the door, gripping the heavy oxygen tank in her right hand, the scalpel palmed in her left. The door handle turned. The hinges squeaked as a man in tactical gear stepped into the closet. His rifle was raised, the mounted flashlight sweeping the darkness. He took 2 steps inside. He never saw her. Sam moved with a speed that defied logic. She swung the heavy steel oxygen cylinder in a brutal, tight arc, bringing it down squarely on the back of the man's Kevlar helmet. The impact didn't kill him, but the kinetic force snapped his head forward, concussing him instantly. As his knees buckled, Sam caught his body to prevent his heavy armor from crashing against the floor. Before he could regain his senses, she clamped her left hand over his mouth and nose, the Hazon-0 scalpel pressed gently but firmly against the carotid artery of his neck. He thrashed, his eyes wide with sudden, primal terror as he stared up into the ice-cold, dead eyes of the blonde nurse. "Make a sound, and you bleed out in 8 seconds," Sam whispered in perfect, unaccented Spanish. The man froze, his chest heaving. With surgical precision, Sam struck him behind the ear with the butt of his own sidearm, rendering him completely unconscious. She lowered him silently to the floor. She worked fast. Using the medical tape, she bound his wrists behind his back and taped his mouth shut. She stripped off his chest rig, pulling his Glock 19 sidearm and 3 spare magazines. She checked the chamber a round was seated. She slid the pistol into the waistband of her scrubs. She didn't take the rifle. It was too bulky for the close-quarters, stealth-based evasion she needed to execute. 1 down, 5 to go. She cracked the door of the supply closet. The corridor was empty, but she could hear the muffled shouts of Hector interrogating Dr. Carter in the main hallway. "I won't ask you again, doctor," Hector's voice echoed, cold and impatient. "Where is Navarro?" Sam crept out of the closet, moving like a ghost along the wall. She reached the corner, intersecting the main hallway, and risked a glance. Hector had Dr. Carter forced to his knees in front of the nurse's station. Megan was curled in a ball nearby, weeping silently. 2 other cartel gunmen were standing guard, one covering the front entrance, the other watching the corridor leading to the ICU. The remaining 2 were actively sweeping the trauma bays. They were closing in on Trauma Bay 1. Sam's mind processed the geometry of the room, the sight lines, and the tactical vulnerabilities. She couldn't engage Hector and the 2 guards in the open hallway. She'd be cut down instantly. She had to peel them apart. She had to make them hunt her in the dark. She slipped into the radiology department, a maze of heavy lead-lined doors and bulky MRI machines. She found the main breaker panel for the wing. The backup generators were keeping the emergency lights on, but the medical gas alarms, the ones triggered when oxygen line pressure dropped, were still active. Sam took her scalpel and slashed the main oxygen supply tube running to the empty radiology bays. Instantly, a deafening, high-pitched mechanical siren shrieked through the hospital. Beep, 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 beep. Pressure loss. Pressure loss. In the hallway, Hector cursed. "What is that?" "It's coming from radiology, boss," one of the guards yelled over the alarm. "Go check it out. Turn that damn thing off before it draws attention outside," Hector commanded. "Diego, you go with him." Sam stood in the shadows of the MRI room, the Glock 19 raised in a modified Weaver stance. 2 men were coming into the dark, her playground. She took a slow, deep breath, the smell of sterile cotton and ozone filling her lungs. The hit squad thought they were the wolves tonight. It was time to show them they had just walked into a cage with a lion. The shrieking of the medical gas alarm masked the sound of Diego and the other gunman, a heavy-set enforcer named Luis, kicking open the heavy lead-lined doors of the radiology department. The emergency lights bathed the room in a sickly yellow hue, casting long, distorted shadows across the bulky, multi-million-dollar GE Healthcare MRI machine sitting dormant in the center of the bay. "Spread out," Diego hissed, his suppressed Heckler and Coke MP5 submachine gun sweeping the corners. "Find the shutoff valve and let's get back to the boss." Sam clung to the shadows near the control room console, her breathing slow and controlled. She held the captured Glock 19 close to her chest. In her SEAL days, operating with Naval Special Warfare Development Group, She had learned that the human eye is drawn to movement and light. By remaining perfectly still in the darkest corner, she was effectively invisible. Luis approached the massive MRI tube, his tactical flashlight cutting through the gloom. "I don't see anything, man. Just a bunch of computer crap." "Check the gas lines behind the machine," Diego ordered, moving toward the adjacent CT scan room. They had broken the golden rule of close quarters combat. They separated. Sam moved. She didn't run. She flowed. Slipping behind Luis, she bypassed the firearm entirely. A gunshot, even suppressed, was too loud for this enclosed space. She needed absolute silence. As Luis leaned over to inspect the severed oxygen line, Sam unspooled a length of heavy-duty braided wire she had stripped from a monitoring machine. In one fluid, brutal motion, she looped the wire around Luis's throat, crossed her wrists, and pulled back with bone-crushing force, driving her knee into the small of his back. Luis dropped his weapon, his hands clawing desperately at the wire, biting into his windpipe. He thrashed, his heavy combat boots kicking against the linoleum, but Sam's leverage was perfect. She had learned this chokehold during close-quarters combatives training in Virginia Beach. 10 seconds later, his struggles ceased. He went completely limp. Sam lowered him silently to the floor. 2 down, 4 left. But as she retrieved his dropped MP5, the weapon's polymer stock clattered lightly against a metal stool. Diego spun around from the CT room doorway, his surefire flashlight beam catching the edge of Sam's scrubs. "Hey, drop it!" he yelled, raising his weapon. Sam didn't hesitate. She threw herself laterally behind the heavy reinforced console desk just as a 3-round burst from Diego's MP5 shredded the drywall where her head had been a fraction of a second earlier. Dust and plaster rained down over her. "Boss, we got a problem in radiology," Diego shouted into his shoulder-mounted Motorola radio. "Someone's in here. It's an ambush." Sam knew her window of stealth had just slammed shut. Hector would send the rest of his men. She needed to end this now. She glanced at the heavy metal oxygen cylinder she had lugged from the supply closet, now sitting near the console. Beside it was a portable defibrillator unit. An idea, reckless and deadly, sparked in her mind. She ripped the adhesive pads off the defibrillator, cranking the joule setting to its maximum output. She slapped one pad onto the metal casing of the severed oxygen pipe, which was still leaking residual gas into the confined space, and stuck the other pad to the metal floor, grating near the doorway. "I'm coming for you," Diego snarled, advancing slowly, his boots crunching on the plaster. "Clear!" Sam shouted, the universal medical warning. She hit the shock button. A massive arc of electricity bridged the gap between the pads. The spark ignited the concentrated pocket of oxygen gas pooling near the floor. A concussive shockwave ripped through the room, accompanied by a blinding flash of blue-white fire. The explosion blew Diego off his feet, hurling him backward through the glass partition of the control room. He landed heavily, his Crye-Precision tactical vest smoking, out cold. Sam coughed, waving the acrid smoke away. 3 down, 3 to go. She scooped up Diego's radio just as it crackled to life. "Diego! Report!" Hector's voice boomed through the speaker, laced with sudden panic. What was that noise? Sam pressed the transmit button. Her voice was devoid of emotion, a chillingly calm operator issuing a sitrep. "Your men are down, Morales. Take your remaining shooters and walk out the front doors, and you might live to see sunrise. Stay, and you die in this hospital." There was a long, heavy silence on the radio. When Hector finally responded, his voice trembled with absolute rage. "You think you can scare me? I am Los Escorpiones. I have the doctor. I have the little nurse. If you do not walk out here, with your hands up in 10 seconds, I will blow the doctor's brains out. 1, 2. Sam's blood ran cold. She abandoned the MP5, tucking the Glock 19 back into her waistband, and sprinted out of radiology. She had to move fast. She navigated the labyrinthine back corridors of the ER, bypassing the main hallways. She knew the hospital layout intimately, the ceiling tiles, the ventilation shafts. In the main triage area, Hector stood over Dr. Benjamin Carter. He had his custom Colt M1911 pressed against the physician's temple. Megan was sobbing uncontrollably on the floor, her hands covering her face. The remaining 2 hitmen flanked Hector, their weapons trained on the dark corridors. 7, 8. Hector counted, cocking the hammer of the pistol. Dr. Carter squeezed his eyes shut, whispering a frantic prayer. Above them, a ceiling tile shifted slightly. 9. The tile gave way completely. Sam dropped from the ventilation shaft above the nurse's station like a striking falcon. She landed squarely on the shoulders of the gunman to Hector's right. The sheer downward force of her landing drove the man to the floor, instantly incapacitating him. Before the second gunman could pivot, Sam drew the Glock 19 and fired twice. Two suppressed poofed, poofed sounds echoed, and the man dropped, his weapon clattering across the floor. Hector roared, spinning around, but he didn't aim at Sam. In a desperate act of cowardice, he grabbed Megan, yanking the terrified young nurse up by her hair and jamming the barrel of his 1911 under her chin. "Drop the gun!" Hector screamed, his eyes wild, spit flying from his lips. "Drop it, or I blow her head off." Sam froze. She stood 15 feet away, her weapon leveled perfectly at Hector's eye. The standoff was absolute. "Let her go, Hector," Sam said. Her voice was terrifyingly calm, lowering the gun by a fraction of an inch to show compliance, but keeping her body angled for a rapid draw. "It's over. You're the last one left. You have nowhere to go." "I'll kill her," he yelled, his finger tightening on the trigger. "Put the gun on the floor." Sam knew the physiological signs of a trigger pull. The whitening of the knuckles, the tensing of the forearm. Hector wasn't bluffing. He was going to shoot Megan, then shoot her. She had a fraction of a second. In special operations, there is a concept called violence of action, the sudden, explosive execution of force that overwhelms an enemy's ability to react. Sam didn't lower the gun. Instead, she dropped to one knee, shifting her center of gravity, and snapped her arm up. She didn't fire at Hector's head. The risk of hitting Megan was too high. She fired one round directly into Hector's exposed right shoulder. The hollow point bullet shattered his clavicle. Hector shrieked, his arm going instantly numb, the heavy Colt pistol slipping from his grasp. As he staggered backward, releasing Megan, Sam closed the distance. She sprinted forward, launching herself into the air. Her knee connected squarely with Hector's jaw in a devastating strike that sounded like a dry branch snapping. The cartel enforcer collapsed in a heap, completely unconscious. The ER was suddenly plunged into an eerie silence, broken only by the hum of the backup generators and Megan's frantic gasping. Sam stood over Hector, kicking his weapon away. She checked his pulse just to be sure he wouldn't wake, then holstered her Glock. The operator vanished, and the nurse returned. She rushed over to Megan, kneeling beside her. "Megan, look at me. Are you hit? Are you hurt?" Megan shook her head wildly, throwing her arms around Sam. Oh my God, what are you? Who are you?" Dr. Carter remained on his knees, staring at the 5 neutralized, heavily armed cartel assassins, then up at his quiet triage nurse. "Sam, what just happened?" "Dr. Carter," Sam said, helping him to his feet. "We have a patient in Trauma Bay 1 who needs our attention. His name is Special Agent William Miller, Drug Enforcement Administration. He's deep undercover in the Sinaloa cartel, and he's carrying vital intel on their border smuggling routes." Carter blinked, dumbfounded. "How? How do you know that?" Sam allowed a tiny, almost imperceptible smile to touch her lips. She thought back to the classified briefings at the Joint Special Operations Command, the late nights studying cartel hierarchies, the endless drills. "I noticed his radio earpiece wire embedded in his collar when we were cutting his shirt. Plus, I recognized the ink. It's a known DEA undercover marker." Sirens wailed in the distance. The diversion on the interstate had finally been cleared, and the cavalry was coming. Red and blue lights began to strobe against the shattered glass of the ambulance bay doors. Dozens of El Paso police cruisers, armored SWAT vehicles, and federal agents converged on the hospital. Heavily armed SWAT officers poured through the entrance, their weapons raised, only to stop dead in their tracks. They found the deadliest hit squad in northern Mexico tied up with medical tape, nursing concussions, or groaning on the floor. Standing amidst the wreckage was a lone nurse in blood-spattered scrubs, quietly checking a patient's vitals. An FBI tactical commander approached Sam, lowering his rifle, a look of utter disbelief on his face. "Ma'am, who secured this building?" Sam adjusted the IV drip on Agent Miller's arm. She didn't look up. "Building is secure, Commander. Suspects are prepped for transport." "Oh, and you might want to call maintenance." There's a slight gas leak in radiology. The commander stared at her, then down at Hector Morales, who was handcuffed to a gurney with heavy-duty surgical tubing. Who the hell are you? Sam picked up her clipboard, returning to her perfectly calm, 50 beat per minute baseline. She signed off on the patient's chart with a flourish. I'm just the new triage nurse, Sam replied, walking past the stunned federal agents to get a fresh cup of terrible hospital coffee. From the battlefields of Syria to the sterile halls of a Texas ER, true warriors never stop protecting the innocent. Samantha Hayes proved that heroics aren't just for the battlefield sometimes, they happen on the graveyard shift. Did this intense story of survival and tactical brilliance keep you on the edge of your seat? Hit the like button, subscribe for more incredible real-life stories of heroism, and share this video with a friend who loves action.
Hi, my name is Tranthan, the owner and manager of Noble Tales. After watching the video, a cartel hit squad took the ER hostage. They didn't know the new nurse was a SEAL. I'd really like to know what you think. How did this story make you feel? For me, the strongest feeling was seeing courage stay quiet until it was truly needed. Sam never looked for attention or recognition, but when innocent lives were in danger, she stepped forward and used her skills to protect others. It's a reminder that real strength is often hidden beneath an ordinary appearance. Have you ever been surprised by someone who turned out to be far more capable than anyone expected? And which moment in Sam's story stood out to you the most? If this story gave you something to think about, feel free to leave a comment below. And if you enjoy stories like this, consider liking the video or subscribing to Noble Tales for more meaningful adventures and unforgettable characters.